Good morning. I just got the signal that we're ready to go. So open your Bibles to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2. Daniel is one of those really interesting, or Daniel chapter 2 is really one of those interesting chapters in the Bible. It is a prophetic vision. Interesting thing to me is it's not an Israelite or a child of God that had the vision. It was a pagan king, and God uses that to get a message across. But it's kind of chapter 2 is there are a lot of visions in Daniel, especially chapter 7, 8, and 9. And chapter 2 kind of lays the groundwork for those visions that are coming up later. So it'll help us out a little bit. It really covers, for the Jewish people, it covers history in a broad sense, all the way from Babylon to Rome. It's a long period of time. We'll look at that as we move through the chapter. Beginning in verse 1, the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Now there are culture, societies, whatever you want to refer to them as, that place a great deal of emphasis upon dreams. They have, the ancient Babylonians had books that they would look at that would tell them what certain things in dreams meant, so they could interpret those dreams. I'm not a big believer in interpreting dreams. I'm not a big believer in dreams meaning anything. I think dreams are just dreams. I never will forget 1974, I was in the Army. I was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. And in October of the previous year, October of 73, the Yom Kippur War broke out. It lasted just a couple of weeks. And they were afraid in 1974 it was going to break out again. The entire U.S. Army was placed on alert. I walked around for 2 weeks with a loaded M16 rifle in my hand and a steel helmet on. I didn't go anywhere without it for 2 weeks. I went to bed one night and I had the weirdest dream. I dreamed that I was in the car with Henry Kissinger. And we were trying to solve the Mideast war crisis. And we did. We fixed it. I don't believe that meant anything. I think it had to do with a lot of fact that's what was going on, and that's just what I dreamed about. I'm not a big believer in hidden meanings in dreams, but that's me. But a lot of societies and there are still people today who do that, put a great deal of emphasis on their dreams. Now, in this particular dream, there actually was a meaning. Evidently, Nebuchadnezzar had this dream. He could remember he had a dream, but he couldn't remember what it was about. It troubled him, it upset him, it bothered him because he couldn't remember the dream. And there may have been something connected to it that kind of left him feeling that way. Now also, notice verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. It's plural. There are some who believe this particular dream Nebuchadnezzar had was recurring. It happened several times, not just once. And that may have been one of the things that really troubled him. He commanded the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans to be summoned to tell the king his dreams. They came in and stood before the king. Now you have 4 different groups of individuals there. Those things in a lot of ways kind of overlap one another. The word that's translated there, magician, is a reference to those who were priests of the pagan gods. They were considered to be inspired. They were considered to be connected to the pagan gods. That was the magician. Now, the enchanters, you kind of get the idea by the word there. They used spells and those kind of things, and they were believed to be able to talk to dead people. Then you had the sorcerers, witchcraft. And you had the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans originally, the word Chaldea comes from a phrase in reference to the southern part of the nation of Babylon. That was a part of Babylon that was called Chaldea. Eventually, the word Chaldean was used to refer to the most educated, the most learned, or the most intelligent. And so that's who the Chaldeans were. As we mentioned, those four phrases kind of intermingled. But there were individuals from each one of those groups that would have served as the king's advisors. When he needed advice, when he needed to talk to somebody, he needed to solution to somebody, that's who he went to, those individuals. They came in before the king because they were called for. The king said to them, I have a dream and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. That gives you the idea that Nebuchadnezzar doesn't remember the dream. He doesn't say, I'm troubled to know the interpretation. He says, I'm troubled to know the dream. I can't remember. The Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic. It's interesting, from here through chapter 7, that part of the book of Daniel is written in Aramaic. It's not written in Hebrew, it's written in Aramaic. Because these chapters have a lot to do with interaction between the Jews and the Babylonian court. And the Babylonian court's official language is Aramaic. And so it's written in Aramaic. King, live forever, tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. I can do that. You tell me a dream, I can interpret it. It may not be the right interpretation, but I can interpret it. And so the advisors came, and the king said, I want to know this dream. And they said, okay, tell us the dream, we'll interpret it. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and the interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and its interpretation. This should have, if you consider the fact, these individuals that were talking to Nebuchadnezzar were supposedly connected to their idol gods. They were inspired. They were spoken to by the gods. They had connection with the dead. That shouldn't have, if all that were true, what Nebuchadnezzar asked them then should not have been that difficult. They should have been able to do it. And so it wasn't an absurd request. Now, from a human standpoint, it's an absurd request. But they claimed that they had special connections that humans didn't have. They claimed they were connected to God. They claimed they had connections to magic and spirits and dead people and all that kind of stuff. They should have been able to do this. And so the king was not considering the position they claimed to be in. The king was not being outrageous. Show me the dream, show me the interpretation, or you're dead. And not only are you dead, I'm going to tear you limb from limb. And not only am I going to cut you up, I'm going to destroy your house. The probability is that what Nebuchadnezzar is talking about there is not only are the magicians and the sorcerers and the enchanters and Chaldeans executed, their families are as well. Oftentimes in that day and age, when a person was executed for disobeying the king and for treason and those kind of things, it was considered to be normal to execute the family too. And so you're going to be gone, your families are going to be gone, and in all likelihood, where their house was going to become a garbage dump. They answered the second time and said, let the king tell the servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation. Now notice back in verse 5, he said, the word from me is firm. What he means by that is, I've made up my mind. This is what's going to happen. You're not going to change my mind. Well, they're still trying to change his mind. Let the king tell us the servants the dream. We will show the interpretation. The king answered and said, I know with certainty you are trying to gain time because you see the word from me is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Tell me therefore the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation. Now, based on those words that Nebuchadnezzar used, there are some people who believe Nebuchadnezzar knew the dream. He remembered it. But he's testing his magicians. He's testing his advisors by saying, I don't remember the dream. Tell me the dream. Because he talks here about the fact that if you've all conspired to speak lying and corrupt words to me. In other words, they got together as a group and they decided this is what we're going to answer. Notice he said, verse 8, they're trying to gain time. They're stalling. They're stalling because they don't have the answer. And they could have. Possibility was they could have made up a dream. Here's the problem. The king had the dream. If you tell him the dream, maybe you're going to kind of provoke his memory. And he remembered. The second thing is there's a possibility he remembered the dream. He didn't know the interpretation. And to try to fake things through when your life is on the line can be a little bit difficult. You're trying to gain time. They were hoping that number one, they were hoping that the king would change his mind and give him a dream. Secondly, they were hoping that some other crisis would come up and he'd change his mind and forget about it and go on something else. It was on the hope they had. And he said, no, not going to work. If you do not make the dream known to me, there's but one sentence for you, you're going to die. Verse 10, the Chaldeans answered, there is no man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that you have asked, the king asked is difficult, and no man can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. The Chaldeans give a fourfold response. The first thing they say is there's not a man on earth who can do that. Funny thing is, they're right. There's not a man on earth who can do that. Secondly, they said, nobody has asked, no king has ever made this request. This request is out of line. No king has ever done this. Thirdly, they say, the thing that the king asked is difficult. It's hard to do. Well, that's correct too. It was hard to do. And the fourth thing they say is, no man can show it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. The only place you can get this answer from is from the gods who are not here. Now, the interesting thing is that they were telling the truth, but they changed the word gods to God. But the only thing that's interesting about that is they claim to have a connection to the gods. They claim to be able to speak to the gods. They claimed when they were interpreting dreams and they were giving the king advice, it was coming from the gods. The gods had told them this. And so now they're sitting there saying, we can't do that because the only people who can do that is the gods. Then go talk to the gods. You say you can do that. You say you have that connection. Prove it. Because of this, the king was angry and very furious and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. Now, I want you to think for just a moment. All the wise men of Babylon includes who? Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. Now there is some question amongst scholars as to whether or not when this event occurred, Daniel and his three friends were still in training. Because chapter 1 mentions the fact that they were to be trained for 3 years. Chapter 2 talks about the fact this is the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. So we may have something a little bit out of chronological order. There are other ways you can figure that out. But anyway, Daniel and his three friends were not in the original meeting with the king and the wise men. But Daniel is now under the edict because he's one of the wise men. He's going to be dead without an opportunity to defend himself. So the decree went out, the wise men were about to be killed. They sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Notice, I love this statement. It says Daniel replied with prudence and discretion, wisdom and tact. He didn't go to Arioch screaming and hollering and yelling. He didn't go pitching a fit. He didn't make a big deal. He used wisdom and he used tact. Sometimes the way that we say things are just as important or more important than what we say. Now, if a man walks in the house at the end of his day and looks at his wife and says, honey, I sure do love you, that's different. And the husband walking out and his wife says, I love you! You think the wife would respond in two different ways? Same words. Exact same words. Different delivery. And so Daniel used discretion and tact. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Some translations say severe. In other words, why are all the wise men? What's happening? He doesn't even know what's happened. He doesn't even know the king had a dream. He doesn't even know that these men had talked. He doesn't know any of that. So why is this happening? Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time he might show the interpretation of the king. You think that's a little bold of Daniel? Give me a time. Make me an appointment. I don't care what it is. Make me an appointment. And I'll come talk to the king, and I'll show him the interpretation. Now, how was Daniel able to do that? That little word, faith. Now, I did not notice this for a while. In verse 17 of Daniel chapter 1, I noticed it, I just didn't think about it. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. We're told in the previous chapter that Daniel had the ability to interpret dreams. Now the question is, was that recorded when these events took place, and did Daniel know it, or was it recorded afterwards? That I don't know. But Daniel was given knowledge in dreams, and he had enough faith and confidence in God that God was going to do what God needed to do, and God was going to protect him. So he went to Arioch. You couldn't go directly to the king. You had to go through his people that worked for him. He went to Arioch, who was kind of his supervisor, and said, make me an appointment with the king. Daniel went to his house, made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and as was mentioned before, that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their Babylonian names and their Jewish names, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Daniel. Daniel made this statement, give me an appointment. Let me talk to the king. I'll interpret the dream. And then he goes and asks God to help him interpret the dream. That's confidence. That's faith. That's a real belief that God's going to take care of him. And not only did Daniel pray, but Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, they all prayed that God would give Daniel the answer, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. Now, there are a couple of things in there I want to note. Number one, that phrase, God of heaven, is used throughout the book of Daniel. And it's used to indicate the distinction between Jehovah and the idol gods of the Babylonians. The God of heaven, not a God, not some God, not one God, but the God of heaven. One of the messages of the book of Daniel that we get over and over and over again is God is sovereign. God rules the world. He doesn't rule just Israel. He doesn't rule just Jerusalem. He doesn't rule over just the Jews. He is sovereign king. And that point is made again and again and again throughout the book of Daniel. He is sovereign. He is the God of heaven. Seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, this secret, this thing that nobody knows, this dream, this interpretation. They need to know. But Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Somewhere in night time, Daniel got a vision from God that told him what this dream was and what it meant. Daniel can now go before King Nebuchadnezzar and answer his questions. Daniel answered and said, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belongs wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I will give thanks and praise. You have given me wisdom and might, and now have made known to me that which we ask of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter." When Daniel receives the vision and knows what it's all about, the first thing he does is thank God. He mentions his gratitude. Notice what he thinks. The name of God forever and ever, to whom belongs wisdom, and he changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. When Daniel begins to make this interpretation to Nebuchadnezzar, the very first thing he said is, God made you king. Nebuchadnezzar was king of the Babylonian Empire because God wanted him to be king of the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire was ruling that part of the world because God wanted it that way. And all of these empires that are mentioned in this dream as we get through them were there because God wanted them there. Because God put them there. God is still in control of this universe. He still runs it. It's still his. He's still in charge. And I am firmly convinced he's still involved in the affairs of man. He gives people governments that they deserve. That's what I think. Now, I may be wrong. I do know that God's in control. I do know he runs the universe. I do know that governments are subject to him, whether they agree with it or not. But I believe he treats people with their governments in the way that they deserve to be treated. I think that principle is pointed out throughout the Old Testament with God and the children of Israel. He gave them the leadership that they deserved because of the way they were living. Now, that's my opinion. You can do what you want to with it. He changes times and seasons. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. God knows things. God understands things that you and I can't even get close to. He knows what is in the darkness. There's nothing to... Now, he's not talking about physical darkness here. He's talking about spiritual darkness. He's talking about intellectual darkness. He's talking about mental darkness. There is no darkness that God can't penetrate. There are things that I will never know. There are things that I will never understand. And I could make a list of them. But those things that I don't know, God does. God knows things I haven't even thought about. Hasn't even crossed my mind. His knowledge and his wisdom are amazing and beyond the capability of man to understand. He knows what's in the darkness because he has light. What happens to darkness when the light shows up? It disappears. It's gone. It runs. Walk in a dark room, flip the light switch on. What happens to the darkness? It's gone. When God appears, the darkness is gone. Because he's the light. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise. You have given me wisdom and might. You made known to me this dream. You made known to me this interpretation. And now I can go before the king and answer his questions. Does anyone have a question or comment through verse 23? Yes.
When the
I don't know. It doesn't say. The first thing you had to do was have to get them all together, which is why he was looking for Daniel when Daniel approached him. That's what the passage said. That Arioch was looking for Daniel and his three friends so he might kill them. Had to get them all together. I'm sure they would have been in one central location. They were all being executed at the same time. I don't know. But when Daniel made his request, the plan to execute all the wise men was put on hold until Daniel got the chance. Because when Daniel, notice when he says, he talked about the fact, in verse 24 of chapter 2, he went to Arioch and he said, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. In other words, wait. Don't do this yet, because I've got the answer. And the interesting thing about that is, think about this for a moment. Arioch goes before King Nebuchadnezzar and tells Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel can interpret your dream. What do you think would happen to Arioch if Daniel failed? Arioch goes, I'm vouching for this man. I'm telling you, this man can do this. And if Daniel can't, in all likelihood, Arioch is dead. You don't disappoint the king, especially King Nebuchadnezzar. He was known for being very brutal and very harsh and kind of inhumane in his treatment of a lot of people. So Arioch not only, he's kind of putting himself on the line. And that shows that he had trust and faith in Daniel. Arioch brought in Daniel before the king, and in haste thus said to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. You think maybe Arioch took a little credit he didn't deserve? I have found a man. No, you didn't. That man found you. He's trying to get in a little good word with the guy. I did this, king. Maybe some of that reward that this guy's going to get, maybe I'll get some of it. He's going to make known to the king the interpretation. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Now, if you look at it from a purely human standpoint, there's no question as to why the king is skeptical. Daniel is a young man. Daniel is a Jew. He's not even a Babylonian. If he's out of training, he's barely out of training. He's a novice, just getting started. And all of the king's great men, his greatest advisors, his greatest Chaldeans, his greatest enchanters, all these people had not been able to do this. And now here comes in this young whippersnapper, like we used to say when I was a kid, saying, I can do this. Can you? Can't you? And I like Daniel's answer. No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dreams and the visions of your head as you lay in bed are these. Now, verse 28. There is a God in heaven. There's that phrase again. God in heaven. Distinguishing from the Babylonian gods, who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to God gave you this dream. God told you this dream. Your dreams and your visions we will tell for you. Now, go back to verse 27. No wise men, enchanters, magicians, and astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. Who does that phrase include? It includes Daniel. Daniel's among the wise men and the enchanters and the astrologers and the Chaldeans. No one of those can do that, and that includes me. Daniel could do it. I can't do this. But, he starts verse 28 with a word, but there's a God in heaven. God can do this. And God's the one who gave you this dream. And I'm going to tell you what the dream was, and I'm going to tell you what the interpretation was, because God told me. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be after this, and he reveals mysteries, made known to you what is to be. In other words, this dream is about the future. This is about what is to come. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all living, but in order the interpretation may be known to the king, you may know the thoughts of your mind. It's revealed to me, not because I'm smart, not because I'm wise, not because I interpreted this myself, but God has a message for you. This message is for you, King Nebuchadnezzar, and I'm going to give it to you. You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. The image, mighty and exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. I want you to think about this. Try to get in your mind's eye a picture of this vision. The king was the image, mighty and exceeding brightness, and its appearance was frightening. The head of the image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Now get a picture in your mind of that kind of an image. I have an idea, it doesn't say anything about it about the size, but I have an idea this is a pretty big image. I don't think, and again I may be wrong, this is my opinion that I get from kind of the ideas they're giving to you, that this was a rather tall, big being, whatever it was, this image had. Its head was made out of fine gold. Its chest and arms were of pure silver. Its belly and its thighs were of brass or bronze. Its legs of iron. Its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Now that's an awesome image. But now listen to the rest of it. As you look, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and he struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. The iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so there not be a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Notice he says this image is there. And a stone comes out of the mountain that's not touched by human hands. The message of that is, man had nothing to do with this. This is God. This is something that God is doing. And he says that this stone, it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. If I'm standing up and you cut my feet off, what happens to the rest of me? I'm going to fall down. I can't stand up without feet. And so the stone struck the feet and the legs. They disintegrated. The rest of the image disintegrated. The chaff blew everything away, and a piece of it couldn't be found. Can you imagine that? Not a piece. Not a piece of the gold, not a piece of the silver, not a fragment of iron, not a fragment of brass, not a fragment of anything. It's all gone. Nowhere to be found. And this stone became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Now, we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom. Notice there again, that phrase, God of heaven, he's the one who rules, has given you the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar, God put you here. God gave you this kingdom. This is God's work. Has given you the kingdom, power, and the might, and the glory, in whose hand he has given wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold. Okay, the first part of the vision, head of gold. That's you, Nebuchadnezzar. You think that may have puffed him up a little bit? Give him a little bit of an ego? You're the head of gold. You're the star of this image. You're ruling over the beasts of the field, the children of man, the fowl of the air. You're ruling over them. You are the head of gold. Another kingdom inferior to you shall rise after you, in a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break all these. Daniel says there are going to be 4 kingdoms. You're the first one. And there's a second one, then there's a third one, and then there's a fourth one. Now, if you go back and look at history, after Babylonia was destroyed, who took over? Medo-Persians, Cyrus. After the Medo-Persians were destroyed, who took over? Greece, Alexander the Great. There's the third kingdom. Second kingdom, Medo-Persia. Third kingdom is Greece. After the Grecians were destroyed, who took over? Rome. There's your four kingdoms. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. These are going to be in successive order. This is the way they're coming. There shall be a fourth kingdom strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. One of the most powerful forces that has ever existed on the face of the human earth was the Roman army. The Roman army struck fear in everybody they went after. The interesting thing, Rome did not plan on becoming a world power. What happened was Rome was such a powerful army. You know how Judah became a vassal of Rome? There were two people fighting over the kingship of Judah, and one of them went to Rome and asked for help. That's how Judah became a vassal of Rome. By volunteering, by saying, we want to be under your rule because I need to get rid of this other guy, and I can't do it, you can't. That's what happened in a lot of those countries. The Roman army was so powerful and so fear-inducing that people would give up before they ever fought. And they would voluntarily submit themselves to Rome. Rome never did really have a stranglehold on how to rule a world empire. And they didn't really. What they did in Judah was they appointed Herod to be king and they let him rule his country as long as he paid his taxes and as long as he didn't rebel against Rome. Rome didn't really have anything to do with the day-to-day affairs in Judah. Or many of the other provinces they ruled over. There was a local king who did that. They just paid taxes to Rome. And if they got attacked, Rome would defend them. They never did really have they tried in some ways, but they never did really have full control over this worldwide empire. That's why he talks about the fact, he talks about iron, verse 41, you saw the feet of toes and partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the furnace of iron shall be in you, just as you iron mixed with soft clay. The Roman Empire was this huge worldwide thing that never was united. The Jews did not consider themselves Romans. The Egyptians did not consider themselves Romans. The Grecians did not consider themselves Romans. The only reason they submitted to Roman authority is because they had to. Didn't have any choice. Greece's ultimate allegiance was to Greece. Judah's ultimate allegiance was to Judah. Egypt's ultimate allegiance was to Egypt. And this great, huge empire was never really united. It never became, even though it looked like one great world, it wasn't really at the source. It wasn't really that. And so there was that weakness that was within. As the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. Another thing you remember is when Pompey and Julius Caesar and Augustus first started actually trying to form an empire. Remember, there was a great division between the Roman Senate and the empire. The Roman Senate wanted democracy. Augustus and Julius and all these Caesars wanted an empire. They wanted a dynasty. And there was continual infighting between those individuals. If you remember, it was leaders of the Senate that assassinated Julius Caesar because they thought he was getting too powerful. It's kind of laughable when you consider what happened after that. The following Caesars are more powerful than Julius ever was. But you've got this inherent power of this Roman army mixed in with this weakness, this division, this disunity. Jesus talked about the fact that a divided kingdom shall never stand. That's kind of the idea. The Roman Empire was a powerful empire in its army, but it was weak in a lot of different ways. And it eventually, the Roman Empire was not defeated from the outside. The Roman Empire crumbled from within. It fell apart from the inside, which is the case of almost all great world powers. United States, take notice. Anyone have a question or comment on anything up to that point? I know the bell just rang. Yes. No. Daniel saved him. The decree that Nebuchadnezzar made was, if the dream is interpreted, you'll live. If the dream is not interpreted, you'll die. The dream was interpreted, so they lived. And some of those people became a thorn in Daniel's side. We're going to see some of that as we go through the rest of the chapter. They got jealous. Question or comment? We will pick up with verse 44 next Sunday morning.